Gavin Newsom locked the whole state down, but he and his family could go to schools. They could go to cafeterias and restaurants without masks. And then when accused of this, he lied about it until it got caught on tape where he could not lie anymore. And then he comes back and says, well, I probably should have walked my own talk. The hypocrisy of that was just absolutely unbelievable, unforgiven. And really what it showed is he actually did not believe in the policy that he's putting down. And this show, the CEO Show, is a show about teaching leadership. From a leadership perspective, that is absolutely, unbelievably unacceptable.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Welcome back, friends, to episode 177 of the podcast. However, episode 1 of the new branding of the CEO Show with Bryce Henson. And my friends, I am super excited to welcome you in to the same host, but a new branding, new feel. This is going to be amazing. So I'm going to give you the backstory, the what, the why, the when, to be able to give you proper context so you have insight to the journey, and I'm going to continue to have you follow along for the ride. I also think it's very fitting that this episode is launching the day before Independence Day, which is July 3rd of this year. And tomorrow, the United States of America will turn 248 years old. And as a testament to that, I wanted to start off with the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And a very patriotic guy. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory, but I thought, again, very fitting that the episode perfectly aligns with the new branding of our show to drop right before Independence Day. So this all in mind, the realization, the backstory of this show came from a long journey, if you will, of soul searching and really uncovering my true purpose. And the goal here is to be able to give you the why, but also give you some teaching elements so that way you can do the same, align your purpose, align your passion, align your personal mission, and do good in the world. So that's really what we're going to accomplish in today's episode. Now, to get down to it, the mission of this show is to teach leadership, is to promote capitalism, and is to defend free speech. And the reason that is because my core value is freedom, which here again, wearing red for the red, white, and blue, our country is known for freedom. And I'm super excited to give you some more insight on the why that is. Now, before we go any further, take a step back. Why a mission? Why is it important for a business, a company, an organization, maybe a country, or even a person, even you listening to this or watching this right now, to have a mission? Well, I think having a mission and purpose is 100%, no pun intended, mission critical. And if you look at the study on depression here in the United States, and specifically first world problem, what I've uncovered and realized that making money alone is not enough. Money gives you comfort, but it does not give you purpose. It does not give you fulfillment. And depression rates and anxiety rates are at an all-time high here in first world countries. And what I've realized is that there are some, scientific clinical cases of depression, anxiety, absolutely. But the mass majority of anxiety and depression is a first world problem. You think about third world countries, third world people, there's not a high level of anxiety and depression. The reason is they're working hard. People are working hard just to put food on the table to survive. Once you get to a point where all your needs are set, okay, from evolutionary, from a biological perspective, that's when the human being, the human animal, if you will, needs purpose, needs fulfillment. And really, this is what this show is about. This is what my ventures in life are about, building businesses that have purpose, that have fulfillment, that have passion behind them. And that's my passionate plea for you. Now, to give you some other insights to some other missions that I serve, which all perfectly align with my personal mission, which is the mission of this show, to teach leadership, to promote capitalism, to defend free speech. But in addition to this, I also serve the mission of inspiring fitness and changing lives every day as the CEO of Fit Body Bootcamp, which is an 8-figure international fitness brand, one of the fastest growing indoor fitness franchise brands on the planet. And That's our mission to our core, to inspire fitness and change lives. I also am a coach and a co-founder of the Legacy Tribe coaching group, which our mission is to create personal, professional, and physical transformations that produce higher levels of income, impact, and legacy. And when you combine those two missions with the mission to teach leadership, promote capitalism, defend free speech, what you really uncover is sovereignty, is freedom, is impact, is fulfillment. But when you break it down, freedom is the core of all those things. And that's why I'm very excited to align my personal mission with my business mission. It's also given me this essence of clarity that any future business I have on the horizon, it needs to be filtered through my personal mission. And that's really a call to action, a teaching moment for you. Now, this all in mind, there's an incredible core value exercise that I've executed with my company here at Fit Body Bootcamp, in addition to doing this personally, that I would love to be able to teach you on. For the sake of time, we don't have time today, but if you're interested in this creating a framework on how you too can create core values for your business, for your organization, but most importantly, for you as a person, I'm more than happy to do so. If you will be so kind, drop a comment in the chat. If you'd like me to create some content, I'd be happy to shoot another episode around that. Now, before we get any further, I want to show you the value of having a mission, the passion that goes into it. I also want to address the problem. And before I give you the backstory and the sequence of events that really led me to the conclusion of executing this rebrand of this podcast, I want to share 3 problems that I see that this show will also help solve. Number 1, leadership is at a deficit. And when you look at leadership, I think a wide variety of things, but I think discipline and ownership. These are 2 qualities and characteristics of strong leadership. And we are at a leadership void, deficit, I would say, in the world, specifically hyper-focused over the last handful of years, but even farther than that. And if you look at the obesity rates of our country here in the States, 80% of our population is either statistically obese or overweight. And what that means, there's a lack of self-leadership. Okay, leadership is important, and the framework that I follow is to lead yourself first and foremost before you can lead your family, and then before you can lead your empire. There's 3 pillars in that particular framework, and it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with self-leadership, and we are at a void right now. I've also realized that leadership is the most important skill in terms of your personal fulfillment, your life fulfillment, and also business fulfillment. Leadership is always the problem. It's always the solution. It's a skill that I've acquired, I continue to acquire, and get better at a daily basis because of the values there. So if you're interested to be a leader, to be a business owner, to lead yourself better, lead your family better, lead your empire and your organization better, well, guess what? You came to the right show. The second problem that I see is in recent years, I believe that capitalism, and I like to frame it conscious capitalism, sadly has gotten a bad name, which is madness to me. And I'm going to explain my thoughts on this in a second, but what I do believe is that capitalism is the purest form of self-leadership. Now, it sounds cutthroat, especially when you are comparing it to a socialistic system, which sounds great on paper. It just does not work in reality. But capitalism, it can sound cutthroat at first, but in reality, what I love about it, you have to add value to others first in order to get rewarded. And that's an incredibly strong economic system. In fact, it's the economic system that has produced the most wealth, has lifted the most people out of poverty. In fact, this beautiful nation here that I'm streaming live here in the United States of America is founded on the economic system of capitalism, of freedom, of sovereignty. It has produced the richest country in the world in the history of all time. This is the economic system to do so. And for whatever reason, in recent times, specifically universities are teaching socialism and even worse, communism ideas, BS ideas that are oppressing people, that are oppressing economies, and that are oppressing freedom due to lack of perspective. So there's a big issue at play right now in terms of the framing of capitalism versus socialism, communism, or collectivism, as you can categorize all 3. And the last problem that I see that this show is going to help solve and teach is that cancel culture or censorship is on the rise. And we saw this sadly through COVID. I never thought in a million years I would see this at our shores here. But we saw that in spades, and it's a very concerning thing. It's a very passionate plea. I'm going to give you a few examples when I give you my origin story, my backstory on the sequence of events that came to this. And I love our First Amendment of our Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And the fact is history is littered with tyrannical governments, tyrannical businesses, tyrannical leaders who have limited free speech through censorship. Not necessarily for businesses, but specifically governments and leadership. So the fact is here in the States that we are the exception. We are not the rule. This needs to be protected at all costs. Freedom of speech is the bedrock of strong democracy, and I'll tell you why. I look at it from a leadership framework. Because I'm a business guy, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a high performer, I love leadership. And what I've realized is when you look at it from a leadership lens, okay, if having a strong feedback culture is mission critical in an organization. If you have a platform, an environment, a culture where you can exchange ideas freely, good ideas, bad ideas, guess what? I trust in humanity, as time has shown, that when you have the ability to express good ideas and bad ideas, eventually good ideas rise to the top because I trust humanity, and eventually bad ideas rise to the bottom. The opposite is also true, whether it's a tyrannical government, or maybe you can think to yourself a time that you're working in a business and you've worked for a tyrannical leader where you had to walk on eggshells. You couldn't actually communicate what you really wanted to communicate. In that particular environment, a censorship type environment, when you, in this case, have to walk on eggshells, or even worse, if you're restricted by an actual tyrannical government that does not allow free speech, ultimately what happens, good ideas fall to the bottom, and then bad ideas rise, which is a travesty. So this show, again, is going to bring to light some of the concerns that I see and be able to provide some solutions. So this all in mind, that's the foundation. And I want to spend the next 15 minutes or so being able to give you the backstory and to showcase the sequence of events that led up to me shaping my thoughts and really shaping my core values. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all go through the similar human experience, but our individual experiences are different. So maybe you can relate to many of these or a lot of the ideas, and maybe not. But my goal here is to be able to showcase and be able to provide insight on why I've been able to draw the conclusions based off my life experience. And I would encourage you to self-reflect and do the same. So to kick things off in the sequence of events, the origin story, if you will, that's led me up to this point to be in a position to launch the newly branded CEO show with your host, Bryce Henson, yours truly. The reality of the situation is I grew up in socialism, but not in a literal sense, in a figurative sense. Now, I want you to imagine one of my first houses was in rural Georgia in a double-wide trailer, termite infested, alcohol, drug infested in the house. And this was not because of my mother. My mother is an amazing salt-of-the-earth soul who sacrificed so much for her 3 kids, and my siblings and I are so grateful for her. So I love you, Mother Dove. Unfortunately, this is because my father. My father was a drug addict, addicted to alcohol and gambling, not the trifecta for a good family upbringing. And because of that, because of his addiction, there's a sense of censorship, okay, or fear in the household, especially when drugs or alcohol was in the equation. And because of that, you had to walk on eggshells. You never knew what sort of reaction you were going to get. And I lived that way, very volatile for a period of time in my life. And it was not a fun and comfortable situation. And this in mind, that shaped my view on oppression, on fear, on censorship, and it actually gave me so much passion and desire and longing for freedom, for sovereignty, for a strong feedback culture that really had a really foundational experience in my life. Thankfully, by the grace of God, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, we ended up getting out of that situation. And as the story goes, I call it the Great Escape. My father typically would go on benders and gamble a lot of money and drink alcohol and drugs and all that. And verbal arguments would break out. And that was very common in my youth, as I remember, because again, very volatile, especially when drugs or alcohol were included in the equation. But as the story goes, my father went out on a bender that was a bit different than normal, and it was extended. And when he came home, he lost a few $1,000s, which unfortunately, that was a lot of money at the time. It is, but certainly it was a ton of money for us at that period of time. And a few choice words broke out, as you would imagine. My mother, trying to raise 3 kids, being a very good person, didn't appreciate that. And, an argument broke out, which happened, was very common. But this time was different. This time it was energy rich, passion rich, very violent at that. And before you knew it, my mom found herself on the bed being pinned down, gasping for life, gasping for air and gasping for her life. And as it turns out, by the grace of God, my sister ended up walking through, who was a toddler at the time, and distracted my father. And because of that distraction, my mom slipped his grip, her knees hit the ground, and like a bat out of hell, grabbed my sister and ran out of that room and ran out of that life, that house, and our lives never looked the same again. And we ended up landing in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, and without my grandmother, my poor grandmother or my blessed grandmother, I should say, looking up from heaven to this day. She took us in, and she had no plans to take in, her daughter and 3 kids, and grandkids for that matter, but she did, and she was in her 70s at the time, and we lived with her while my mom got on her feet for the better part of 10 years. And my brother and I, Barrett, we shared a room. My grandma shared a room, and my mother and my sister Emma shared a room and actually a bed for the better part of 10 years. So on one hand, it was a very good situation to get us out of that very chaotic mess, but as you would imagine, it was a very tough landing. So we used to run out of money before we used to run out of month. But it was a comfortable and safe living, which is a good thing. But one thing that I noticed, my grandma was born in the States, but her grandparents, so my great-grandparents, escaped communist Poland at the dawn of the century. And they ended up arriving initially into Pennsylvania through Ellis Island, and they moved to Detroit, Michigan when Henry Ford launched the automotive plant, making the Model T for unskilled labor who didn't speak the language. There was a good wage and a lot of money, so that's why my great-grandparents moved there in the state of Michigan. That's where my grandma grew up. And it was interesting. She spoke Polish fluently, and there would be some people now and again that would actually stay with us in the basement. They were our cousins from Poland. And I started to ask my questions. Why are people moving from this distant land called Poland, which I didn't fully have a good understanding when I was 10 years old, could not speak English, but they were willing to risk and sacrifice and really fall on hard times initially for a better opportunity. So I started wondering, what is it about this place called the United States of America that is different, that all these other immigrants are coming here? I started remembering and thinking of these things when I was a young kid. In fact, we still see this today, even though our country has its fair share of problems, just like many other countries. And we have a border crisis going on. Right? There's tons of illegal immigrants moving into our country, and that's a topic for a whole other situation. But my point here is that people are escaping where they're coming from, even though we currently have some problems and lack of leadership in our country right now. They're coming on here looking for a better life. And it's interesting, that thought process today still holds true, nearly 40 years ago. So this all in mind, as I, grow up and I put myself through school and I, turn into a man, if you will, I moved out to Southern California, and I get a job opportunity in Los Angeles that turns into a full-time gig. And I've been here since 2004, 2005. And fortunately, right before I made that move, what gave me the confidence is I enrolled myself into a study abroad program when I was 20 years old. In fact, May of 2004, I put myself on a flight to Tokyo, Japan for the first year of an Advertising in Asia program hosted by Michigan State. And I got a chance to explore and live in Asia for the better part of a few months. And that really rocked my world. In fact, it enabled me, inspired me to travel the world. At the time of this taping, I've been to 36 countries. I speak a foreign language fluently, Brazilian Portuguese. I've lived in 3 countries and 3 continents. And I don't say this to brag. I say this, the world is big. But what happened is it gave me so much perspective. It actually showed me the good, the bad, and the ugly, which I think is such a valuable part of travel. In fact, travel creates, strong leadership, because leadership is perspective, perspective is leadership. So it's made me a better leader, but it's also exposed me to different ideas. And it's also shown me, the poverty, the big government, the collectivism, the socialism, the communist type countries that people come from, and how socialism is a very challenging thing. People escape to our free country, our free market country, to experience freedom. In fact, one of the stories when I first met my wife, she was studying for the Brazilian boards to become a government employee. And interestingly enough, she didn't really have a big passion to work for the government. But in Brazil, which is a third world developing country, very socialistic country, the tax rates are freaking crazy. Okay. It's actually a coveted position to work for the government. The vast majority of the population is poor. Okay, the tax rates are really high. There's a lack of incentive for business owners and entrepreneurs like there are here. So in this particular environment, you get people wanting to work for the government, which is completely inefficient. This is not a good way to go about things, but this is what's happening in the world. So throughout my travels, it's really uncovered and opened my eyes, and on one hand humbled me. It's given me so much gratitude to see other cultures and other experiences, and inspire me to move to Brazil and learn Brazilian Portuguese. It's inspired me, it's lit me up, but it's also given me so much gratitude and appreciation for freedom, for democracy, and for capitalism. Now, as the story continues, fast forward to more recent times in 2020, which I never thought I'd see the day, but we saw COVID and we saw censorship, and I'm going to explain a couple things that I observed in that process. And it's interesting, the Washington Post I was actually just featured, Fit Body was on an article in the Washington Post, but during COVID, they were very staunch about, lockdowns, this, that, and the other. Well, in 2023, there was just an article came out that the failed lockdown experiment. And I thought that was really interesting because in 2020 and 2021, there was so much censorship and, from a wide variety of angles, news medias, government, which I'm going to talk about in a second, all for naught from my perspective. And then interesting, if you pull the onion or the ribbon even further, in 2023, the beginning of 2024, the CDC, after all the chaos that has happened, recommended that we treat COVID-19 officially just like the flu. And I thought that was very interesting, to say the least, and we'll kind of leave that at that. But this all to say, the biggest thing that enraged me, that scared me, and that's given me so much concern is uncovering government censorship in terms of social media. And what I mean by this is this. And before I go into that, I'm a free market capitalist. I believe that you should have the ability to freely express your ideas and vice versa, just as long as you're physically hurting or harming anyone else. Okay, this is the essence of freedom of speech, a good feedback culture. All right. I also believe that if you are an entrepreneur and you want to launch a technology company, you want to launch a social media platform, it's a private organization, you have the ability to censor people. Do I believe that's the right approach? No, I don't. But you have full autonomy. What I take massive issue with is when the government, just like it has in other third world restrictive, tyrannical governments, creating, I guess, communist governments specifically, creating censorship. And I never thought in a million years it would hit on our doorsteps here in the United States. I thought that was a North Korea thing. I thought that was a Venezuela thing. I thought that was a communist the Communist People's Republic of China thing. That's what I had thought. But as it turns out, Mr. Elon Musk, who I look up to from an entrepreneur, visionary perspective, he's very controversial, which just blows my mind. But that aside, okay, he uncovered through the Twitter files that he uncovered FBI tampering and censorship within the account of the presidential administration, specifically Hunter Biden. Now, I want to take a step back here for a second. Do I think Joe Biden is a good president? No. Do I think he is a very poor leader? Yes. He can barely communicate a message, and a principle of leadership is strong communication. But that aside, whether you love Joe Biden, whether you hate Joe Biden, all good. I respect you. I respect freedom. That's the whole point of this. I also don't believe just because Hunter Biden, who's an absolute shitbag for lack of better terms, just because he has been involved with drugs and alcohol and addiction and all that, which, shoot, I'm a recovering alcoholic as well, so I'm not here to cast stones. But my whole point is, just because I don't believe Hunter Biden's a good person, I actually don't think that has anything to do whether or not Joe Biden, his father, is eligible or not eligible to be the president. It's two completely separate things. However, what I have a massive issue is when we've uncovered the FBI through the Twitter files, through Elon Musk, has proven that the FBI, our government, put pressure on Jack Dorsey of Twitter at the time, okay, of Mark Zuckerberg, of Facebook, Instagram, and Meta, of the different social media platforms, suppressing the news story for fear that that would put a bad image on the Biden family. Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I'm not here to argue whether the Bidens are right or wrong. That's irrelevant. That's not the topic of this conversation. What the topic of this conversation is the ability for our government to censor things, which is incredibly concerning. I actually thought there would be riots on the streets. There wasn't. But I guess in hindsight, the changing and branding and rebranding of teaching 3 principles that I believe are absolutely mission critical in human prosperity, this is my form of petition, is to ensure that censorship is not active part of our government, that free markets, free ideas can continue to flourish. So this all in mind, there's a few other sequence of events that really shaped my mind around this. And fast forward a few years until August of 2023. And if you can believe, I just shared my Polish heritage a second ago. But if you can actually imagine, the first time I visited Poland to see my own heritage was because of my Brazilian family. My brother-in-law, Lou, who is the brother to my wife, Tatiana, Brazilian guy, very good guy, good-hearted guy, very smart, intelligent. He's a computer programmer. And in 2021 or 22, around that time, he ended up moving to Poland from Brazil, where he was born and raised. And he's a computer engineer for a subsidiary of UBS, the famous Swiss bank. And while he was there, he's still there right now at the time of this recording, we thought, myself, Tatiana, and his mom, who's like my second mother, my mother-in-law, thought it'd be a great idea to go visit Europe and Poland specifically to see him. And so it was an incredible trip. We took about 10 days. We went primarily to Poland. We went to Italy as well. But while we were in Poland, we saw his, I guess, town that he lives, which is really cool. We saw a few different cities. We also went to go see Krakow. And Krakow is one of Poland's major cities. Absolutely beautiful. I would highly encourage you to take the opportunity when you're traveling, specifically the summertime. The weather was gorgeous. It was actually a beautiful city. One of the other things, though, is interesting, which was very intentional. By the way, if you go to Krakow, there's these amazing salt mines, undercover radar. That was not a vision for us, but we ended up going to see the salt mines on a tour. Unbelievable. So highly encourage you to do so. Anyways, I digress. The main point of that was we went to go see Auschwitz, which Auschwitz was the most deadly and famous concentration camp for the Nazi Germans when Hitler overran the country for the Holocaust. In fact, 6 million Jewish people died during the Holocaust, and 2 million people were slaughtered in Auschwitz. And it was just this really touching experience, moving experience, really hard to see in some ways, other ways hopeful as well, to see humanity coming together. And I would highly encourage you, not if you have the opportunity, take the opportunity at some point in your life. I think it's mission critical for you to see what human nature, the dark side of human nature, so that way we can live the bright side of human nature. In fact, there's a sign that's posted around the walls, and I forget who it was quoted by, but it says, "Those who don't remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And going through the tour was a full-day tour. We got picked up in the morning by a bus. It's about an hour bus ride from Krakow and an hour bus ride in the day back. It was a hot August day, and we had a tour guide who kind of walked us through, and we saw the different chambers, and we saw the wood wall, the beating wall, where many prisoners were beat to bloody pulp or death or even worse. We saw the gas chambers, the labor fields. It was just a very, very deep, heavy experience that I would strongly recommend that you take the opportunity. But I'll never forget, towards the end when you see, the different museum exhibits of, the gas chambers, the hair of the victims, the teeth of the victims, the belonging of the victims, the photos that are lined up of the victims. And I'll never forget, there was a child, I don't know her age, maybe anywhere from 11 to 12 or 13, and she was visibly distraught, at this particular experience and going through the tour. And she was crying, and she finally mustered up enough clarity to ask the tour guide in English. It was an English guided tour, how could this happen? How could this monstrosity happen? And the tour guy said, well, there's a lot of, complications in terms of government, the geopolitical climate, censorship. But the one thing for sure is this: when good people are afraid to speak, bad things happen. When good people are afraid to speak, bad things happen. And that was just soul crushing to me. It was absolute soul crushing to me. Also knowing that the first thing from an education perspective the Nazis did, I want to say in 1939, is they censored media under the guise and how it was a good and benefit, okay, for their population. So when you look at these two particular things, very, very concerning. And this, my friend, will never leave me, and I hope it doesn't lead you as well. And this is why it's so important. Our First Amendment, the ability to speak freely, to combat. And again, if you disagree with me, that is completely okay. I applaud you. I want you to have the forum to express your thought. I want the same thing, and this is how humanity wins. Now, speaking of humanity, after that experience in Q4 of 2023, I ended up reading a couple books. The first book I stumbled upon by a lady named Yeonmi Park, which, by the way, I would love to interview Yeonmi Park on this show. So if you have a connection or a point, which I'll give you the story here in a second, I would really appreciate that introduction. She has a message that all humans need to hear. Now, I first experienced or got introduced to Yeonmi from afar as she was on the infamous Joe Rogan Experience podcast. As it turns out, she is a North Korean defector. She, quote unquote, defected, I want to say in 2007 or 2008 by accident. She actually was not trying to escape from North Korea. She's from a city on the border of China. She was actually trying to live. She was starving to death. And through a series of many different situations, she accidentally defected and crossed the China border. She ended up getting, sold into human trafficking, sex slavery. Thankfully, escaped out of that. Moved up to Mongolia, and then got transferred or transitioned or transferred to South Korea, where she stayed for a few years and then eventually moved to the States. And she lives, at least from her book's perspective, in the city of Chicago. And she's written two books. The first book is In Order to Live, and it's literally unbelievable of her recounting the story of her accidentally, and almost dying many times escaping from North Korea in that story. Unbelievable story. Highly encourage you to watch it or read it, depending on, I guess, the book or the Audible. You can't watch it. It's not a film. Forgive me. Either book or on Audible. That all in mind, the second book she wrote is While Time Remains is the title. And in that book, it's the story of her moving to the United States, learning English, being indoctrinated to the culture. She actually went to Columbia University. And if you can believe, what she uncovered is the same socialistic, collectivistic, woke BS ideas that oppress people, that put people in a bad situation, the same ideas they teach in North Korea are the same ideas that her professors are teaching at the University of Columbia. That is unbelievable. In fact, she was accused by her professors, and she's actually been censored, which is insanity to me, from what she's been through, the experience in the biggest shithole country in the world because of the communist dictator regime of the Il family. I believe that's how you pronounce their last name, She's been accused by some outlets of being a right-wing extremist. Her response to this is, friends, I don't know right, left, or right wing, left wing. I'm not from here. What I do know is I come from North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, the most repressed and oppressed dictatorship, communist regime on the planet. I experienced this, And what I can tell you is the same ideas that are taught here are being taught in American universities. And when I read this content, I'm thinking, what the hell is going on right now? This is insanity to me. There's another book that I want to share as part of this sequence. But before I do, I want to give a little bit of perspective in terms of after I read that book, I met with my business partner, the founder of Fit Body Bootcamp, who's also a featured guest on the CEO show of the CEO Show podcast, which very excited to showcase the second episode in terms of this new branding next week, where I provide him the platform to showcase his story of his family escaping from communist, Soviet Union back in 1980. So it's an incredible episode. I cannot wait for you to watch it. Stay tuned for next week. But this all in mind, I was meeting with him at the end of 2023 and one of our monthly meetings. And his big vision, he's like, Bryce, I've been watching your content. I absolutely love it. But I think there's a big opportunity here for you to expand your branding, okay, by changing the branding of the show, but get hyper focused on a niche that you're really passionate about that can serve humanity, serve business owners, serve leaders. And that was his coaching. And he actually recommended at that period of time to change the show's branding from the Fitness CEO podcast to the CEO show with Bryce Henson. Now, as you would imagine, that moment, it was a lot to digest. I wasn't totally convinced in the moment, but I let it marinate. B also has never steered me awry. So I took that coaching and reflected in that coaching. But his big passion there, you could open up the branding, but really go niche on pillars that are going to help humanity, but also that you're passionate about. Because passion creates traction. Passion is sensationalism. Passion will help people. Okay, passion is contagious. And that was his coaching that I put in the back of my mind. Shortly thereafter, I think about the week after that, and a lot of travel, another travel story, because again, travel is perspective. Perspective is leadership. Leadership is perspective. So you want to be a better human, okay? Go travel. And you don't have to stay at the Ritz or the 5-star hotels. You can, stay at hostels or, budget, you can stay at budget, economic type of hotels and accommodations. But the biggest call to action here is see how people, experience the world. See how people live. There's a famous quote by Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to probably butcher it, but if you're 22, if you're hungry to explore the world, sleep on couches, live with people, see how they experience the world. And that quote really stuck with me. And I didn't get it exactly right, but you got the essence of it. So in any case, while I was on a trip to Australia to visit Tatiana's family for Christmas, which we normally go to Brazil, a lot of travel last year in 2023, but we ended up going to Perth, Australia, and all our family was there for a period of about 2 weeks, which is an incredible experience. And ended up reading, or I should say listening on Audible 2 times on my 30-hour voyage, which is about 12-hour book, 1 time there, 1 time back. The book called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And I'm going to be able to provide some takeaways from that piece of content, which really shaped the way I think about business in a very subtle but very impactful way. And I'm going to finish the episode with some tangible action steps that I took doing the work, doing the exercises and the workbook exercises within the book, that I'm going to encourage you to do the same. So this all said, if I can really describe the book in very one fell swoop, it's that the fact that most entrepreneurs, from Patrick Bet-Davids, who's the author of Choose Your Enemies Wisely, that most entrepreneurs, they either follow a business that's totally passion-based or totally logic-based. And the problem is you need both. You need a business that's built on logic. That is absolutely 100% critical. But just a business on logic that does not have emotion, that does not move people, you're never going to be able to create a movement, attraction to get people on board in your vision. His message was you need both logic and emotion, which was his big call to action. And at that period of time, I've been teaching a lot of logic in terms of this show about how to be a fitness entrepreneur, how to be a better leader, be a better sales and marketer, all really important things, but maybe a little bit lacking the emotion. Because when you establish, for example, emotion, and how you do that is you identify the right enemies. And when you identify the right enemies, because let's face it, we all have enemies, okay, in life. That's just the reality of the situation. There's good, bad. That's just the dichotomy of human nature, all right? And when you have and you choose your enemies wisely, if you will, what you do is you unlock relentless drive, and you unlock relentless motivation and emotion to move the mission forward. And I'm going to highly encourage you to watch that book. But for the here and now, what he did as an exercise was he asked the question, who do you hate? And my response in my workbook was laziness, entitlement, alcohol, censorship, collectivism, socialism, and communism. What entity established do you hate? Or what entity? So the first question is, what do you hate? The second question was, what entity or establishment? And I wrote big government, because I've seen it fail many times over. I said Gavin Newsom, and I said Prime Minister Trudeau. And why Gavin Newsom? Well, if you live in the great state of California like I do, and by the way, people make mistakes, leaders make mistakes. I have no issue on that. I think the COVID lockdowns was a huge mistake that we're still feeling the effects from. But that said, with the information that Gavin had at the time, if he thought it was a good idea, which it was a horrible idea, but if he thought it was a good idea at the time to lock down the state of California, hey, sometimes leaders have to make tough decisions with the information they have. I can respect that. What I do not respect at all, because people will forgive criminals but not hypocrites, is when Gavin Newsom locked the whole state down, okay, all the peasants down, but he and his family could go to schools. They could go to cafeterias and restaurants without masks. And then when accused of this, he lied about it, okay, until it got caught on tape where he could not lie anymore. And then he comes back and says, well, I probably should have walked my own talk. So for me, that the hypocrisy of that was just absolutely unbelievable, unforgiven. And really what it showed is he actually did not believe in the policy that he's putting down. And again, this show, the CEO show, is a show about teaching leadership. From a leadership perspective, that is absolutely, unbelievably unacceptable. So that is why I get emotional about this particular situation for good reason. The second point would be Prime Minister Trudeau, and specifically on the grounds of censoring media. And what we've seen, what we've learned, okay, from Nazi Germany, from North Korea, from all the most famous and unfamous tyrannical governments, okay, or entities and institutions in the world, the first thing you do in order to control the population is you censor information. Unacceptable and scary for human nature. I am humanitarian, and whether you disagree with me or not, these principles help humanity. I believe so. The other question that I was asked is, why do you want to defeat this enemy? And the answer was, I want to provide liberation and freedom. And then what will it make? What will you feel like when you do? And my answer was blissful. So that's just a little bit of an example of an excerpt, if I can say that right, from the workbook that Petra Bet-David created with Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And again, I'm going to finish off with some action steps. But this all said, my friend, which leads us to the crescendo moment, the big aha, okay, from the sequence of events that have happened to me that really created this aha, this moment of clarity on the official direction and decision to change the branding of this particular podcast, is meeting my friend Petra. Now, you might be asking, who is Petra? I'm going to go ahead and articulate now. And the good news is I have her planned and an interview scheduled, and she should be on the show in 2 weeks' time. So get ready for that. Now, to give some backstory, at the beginning of this year in 2024, I wanted to expand my network because guess what? My network is my net worth, and you know this to be true. So what I did is I invested in a very expensive VIP status networking mastermind series by my two friends and very successful business entrepreneurs, Chris and Lori Harder. And they put together this networking event called the Dinner Series. And it's a mastermind that's really focused on networking and high-end professional and structured networking. So it was a decent amount of money, okay, to invest in the program. I would actually say it's a large sum of money, but an investment that I believe I returned or got returned in the first event. And not only do I enroll in the event, but I enrolled for the VIP status. So in the particular mastermind, they have 3 events during the course of the year. The first was in Scottsdale, Arizona, I think around the end of January. And for the VIP ticket holders, only 10 of us, there's a brunch, then there's an afternoon networking structured event with a keynote, and then it finishes off with dinner, okay? And it was a great event. And if you can believe, I ended up coming in and meeting the attendees of the brunch event. And out of all the people, Petra sits next to me, okay? Out of the hundreds of people that joined this particular mastermind, out of the 10 that joined the VIP, the person sitting next to me was Petra. And we did some ice-breaking opportunities or exercises, so we got to know each other. And it was very clear Petra was not from the States, although her English is beautiful. She's lived here for 10 years. You'll be able to hear her in a couple weeks. She's clearly what sounded like German accent, an Arnold Schwarzenegger type accent. So I'm very curious, sometimes to a fault. And I asked her, hey, Petra, where are you from? And she's like, well, I said, actually, are you German? She's like, well, how'd you guess? With a big smile ear to ear. And that really kicked us off. And I was very curious, so we had a great brunch. But then the story got interesting later on in the afternoon with the structured networking. And as it turns out, we had an awesome day, and there was a keynote that Chris and Lori are friends with, who's also friends with Bedros, Dean Graciosi. Many of you maybe have heard of him. He's business partners with the great Tony Robbins, and he's an incredibly successful business entrepreneur. So he gave the keynote, and the 10 of us in the VIP were afforded the opportunity to chat with him, to take a picture with him. It was a really cool experience. So afterwards, and Petra was with me, I went in, I met Dean, I chatted with him for a few minutes, probably a few seconds actually. And then we got a picture. Well, as I, walked away, what I realized is there was one main picture, but then Petra took a series of a dozen candid pictures of me meeting Dean. I didn't know this. She just grabbed her phone and then she sent those pictures to me. And I thought, oh my goodness, how cool is that? So as the structured networking event finished in the afternoon, Chris was facilitating the experience and was asking for, some feedback and maybe some acknowledgement of someone that was very interesting that you met. And I facilitate and run meetings and trainings all the time. And what I do know, when you get a bunch of people in the group, people become sheeple. No one likes to step up and put their hand up. So I wanted to do my friend Chris a solid. So when he was asking and no one stepped up, I just raised my hand and I took the mic and I said, yeah, you know what? Thanks, Chris, for the opportunity. I want to acknowledge my friend Petra. And I just acknowledged her for being an awesome person, for, I showcased the fact that she took candid cameras and took candid pictures with Dean Graciosi. And I just shared a lot of, love and enthusiasm for her and just meeting her for the first time. But after I deliver that message, and I've been on this journey, as you know, which is the whole point of giving you the insight, the sequence of events. And fast forward, I actually need to take a step back because I didn't really articulate this point of the story when I met her at the brunch, which is the linchpin of the story. So when I was talking with her and I was asking her questions, she was telling me her background, and she was also telling me about her husband, Dirk, like Dirk Nowitzki, the famous NBA player, not him, but that's his name. But when she was explaining her background, because I was curious, if her husband was from Germany, she's like, yes. But his background seemed very, very different than her background. It almost seemed that they grew up in different worlds, even though they grew up in the same country in the same greater city. Well, I unpeeled the onion a bit. What I realized is Petra grew up in East Germany, where her husband Dirk grew up in West Germany. Now, for you history buffs, once the World War ended, World War II finished, Germany, and specifically Berlin, was separated from the East and West. West to the Allied forces, capitalism; East to the communist forces underneath the Soviet Union. So Petra grew up in communist East Germany, and they put a wall called the Berlin Wall for many years there, not to inhibit the people wanting to come from West Germany to East Germany, because if you're in capitalism, you don't want to go to socialism or communism. It was to make sure the people that could stay out to imprison the people in East Germany and East Berlin so they wouldn't escape, to the land of prosperity of capitalism to the West. When Petra was 23 years old, the Berlin Wall fell. So for the first 23 years of her life, in fact, her family stood for hours, just so she could get a ticket to walk through a crevice to explore the other side of the Berlin Wall. This is literally a highlight of her youth. And when I asked her about her background, one thing became very clear. She said, Bryce, my growing up in East Germany was not good. There were some good moments, and I developed strong character from it, but there was two things that were prevalent. Number one, censorship. You could not say anything. In fact, my neighbor made a joke about the government, and the next day, he was thrown in jail, never to be seen again. And because of that, fear was just this element in this part of the culture. Censorship and fear, the staple of any socialist, communist, type of environment. Not a good environment to be brought up in. Where Dirk, on the other hand, grew up in a very affluent capitalist type environment. Even though they grew up in the same country, the same outer city of Berlin, they grew up miles, in worlds apart. So this all to say, going back to the story when I acknowledged my friend Petra, so when I got the mic from Chris, I acknowledged her, and then I was done. But then I stopped for a second, and I think all the emotion, all the backstory, which I've just articulated, just hit me. And then I just spoke with a heart. And it wasn't planned, but I just said, you know what? I will acknowledge my friend for one more thing. She actually grew up in East Germany, and I explained the story of her growing up and the fear, the censorship, her neighbor being locked, in prison, and then her family standing for hours to get a ticket to see the other side of the Berlin Wall, in addition to the fact that her family had rations for food. It was just an incredibly challenging and inspiring moment for me. So I acknowledged her for that from the heart, Wasn't planned, but it was just, I spoke my truth, I spoke my gratitude, in addition to showing her love and gratitude for taking the pictures. And that's where that ended. But this is not where the story ends. The crescendo moment is on the horizon. So after the afternoon networking event finished, then we went to the dinner. And the dinner was awesome. I sat at the VIP table, but there was hundreds of people. It was a really magical experience. Got to meet a bunch of people. And throughout the course of the evening, I had 5 people, 5 guys come up to me and let me know how much they were moved and touched by what I shared, not just specifically acknowledging Petra, but also to the foundation of, freedom and leadership and capitalism and freedom of free expression and thought, with, strong admiration and gratitude for me. But it wasn't until the end of the night when someone that I didn't have the opportunity to speak with comes up and just intense, and he wanted to shake my hand. And I'm not going to swear, but he used a few choice words, one choice F-bomb, and he said, "Bryce," he's like, "we need more mother like you speaking the truth, championing freedom, championing what you just said. This was absolutely inspiring. I'm inspiring, and I want to applaud you and encourage you to do more of that." And I could feel his intensity, his passion, when communicating that message. And for a second, I took a step back, and the stars aligned. Like the whole message of all the journey that I've been on just became very, very clear to me, by merging logic and emotion and my passion, for humanity, my passion to serve, my passion to teach leadership, promote capitalism, defend free speech, all came out. And that was the moment in time where I realized that I needed to make this transition for you, for the world, and for humanity. So, my friends, that is the backstory, the what, the why, or the how and the why. Now I want to give you a little insight to the show format, and then with some couple action steps and recommendations of value to help you on your journey to put a bow on this. Now, the format is going to be a mix of me doing solo episodes like this and continue to interview other thought leaders. From a leadership framework, interviewing, high-profile CEOs, authors, coaches, just like I've interviewed, incredible leaders to date on the Fitness CEO podcast. John Gordon, 30 times bestseller author, famous leadership expert. Phil Heath, self-leadership expert, 7 times Mr. Olympia champion, friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger and The Rock. Sean Stevenson, incredible self-leader, a very fit person. He is the host of the Model Health Show, the most successful health and fitness podcast on the planet. And my friend and mentor, Cameron Harold, founder of the COO Alliance. He's the author of many bestsellers, including Vivid Vision. He's been featured on Oprah. That just gives you an example of guests that we've had from a leadership framework that will continue to be able to interview and glean more insights so you can better up your leadership for yourself, for your family, and for your empire, which is the name of the game. I'm also going to be teaching capitalism, promoting free markets, promoting business, different aspects of business. I'm also going to shine light on socialism, on collectivism, on communism by interviewing other refugees, communists that came from communist Soviet Union, from communist Poland, from Venezuela, from Cuba, and from North Korea. So these are some other aspects in the interviews that I'm going to entertain. And lastly, interview people that champion free speech, that champion free thought, that really understand the value of strong feedback culture in business, in life. And Elon Musk, as an example, will be in the top of the list, and we'll get him at some point. So that all said, that is the framework to give you some better context of the what, the why, the how, and really the passion, the mission behind the show. I'm going to provide a lot of value for you, so I'm just scratching at the surface on this new particular journey. And to conclude, to leave you with some value points, because the whole goal behind this is really uncovering my burning desire, uncovering my personal mission, which is now the filter that all actions in my life, whether it be personal or their business and ventures, need to fit in alignment with. So my call to action for you is as important to self-reflect, define, uncover, all right, your personal mission, so that way you can get passionate, serve humanity, which is my call to action for you. So in the framework of the book, Choose Your Enemies Wisely by Patrick Bet-David, who's a mentor for FAR, an incredible leader. In fact, I would love to get him at some point on the show as well. He asks some of these questions in the book, which I'm going to ask you for you to reflect as the call to action, the value, the takeaway of this particular episode. My question for you in uncovering your mission, your why, your burning desire will be this. Who are your enemies? Who do you hate? What entity or establishment do you hate? Why do you want to defeat this enemy? What will it feel like when you do defeat your enemy? What about your business plan? How can you adjust or create a product or a service to align with your mission and defeat your enemies? How can you adjust your personal branding content to align with your personal mission that also fits in with your business mission? These are all questions that I asked, okay, doing that particular framework, and through a series of events have concluded and really gotten clear on my mission, my purpose, and how I can help you and humanity. So, my friends, that's where I want to leave you with today. I am extremely grateful. I'm extremely excited for you to be on this journey. This is about helping humanity. Leadership is so critical in life, in business. It's the only thing that matters in business. It truly is. Okay? Capitalism, promoting free markets in business. This is the name of the game. Free market economies and capital markets, they work. They've produced, okay, on the day before Independence Day, on this beautiful country of ours, 248th birthday, the most rich and successful and prosperous nation on the planet. We cannot lose sight of this, my friends. And lastly, it's going to be an incubation hub for creating a strong feedback culture, which is the foundation of free speech. So, my friends, this is the value that I'm going to provide. I'm excited for you to be on this journey and cannot wait to uncover some amazing experiences, interviews, and content to add more value to you and human nature and humanity in the process. So I want to thank you for being along for the ride. I want to welcome you to the new branding of the show. And as I sign off, remember that adversity is your advantage. We'll see you in the next episode, and happy 4th of July.